Well, good afternoon, everyone. It looks like we're getting everybody in. We've got a full house today. So we'll wait just a moment and let everybody get connected. If you would, just make sure that your microphone is muted for right now. You know, we never mind you unmuting and asking a question, but we also know that those background noises can come in sometimes. We've got quite a few people still getting connected, so we'll wait just a moment and get everybody in. In the meantime, if you would, I see several of you have already got started just in the chat. Let us know who has joined us today and where you're from. We always like being able to see that. And I know once we kind of get that chat settled down, I know Deb will post the link to the running agenda again. It's the same link that we always have. All right, looks like we've got things kind of settled down just a little bit. Okay, so for those of you that are new to joining us, my name is Melissa Algram. I am the Director of Reading Sufficiency, and I am joined today by my colleague, Deb Wade, who is our Director of Elementary English Language Arts. The two of us together kind of form a frightening duo as far as working with our elementary literacy and trying to make sure that we have everything we need there. So again, you'll see today's link to the agenda in our chat. I'm sure Deb will share that with us in just a moment, but just to make it easy, I'm also going to share this on our screen. So you should be able to see that. Deb, can you let me know, are you able to see the agenda?
Sure can.
All right, thank you very much. So today we kind of put out in our newsletter letting you know about this, this meeting today, that we wanted to just review those processes for promotion and retention. I know this is about the time of year that starts becoming a highlight in everybody's mind, dealing with RSA, of what is it that we can do, what's changed, what hasn't changed, and trying to keep up with everything that has changed over the last few years. I will say that there are not any changes to promotion and retention from last year. So for those of you that are more familiar with it and feel more comfortable with those decisions, there's not a new change to address this year. So that can be a good news sometimes, just to kind of put our minds at ease. But I also wanted to take just a moment and also review our summer programming, because I also know that many of our districts are working on their summer programming. There's often a lot of confusion with summer programming in regards to the Reading Sufficiency Act. As part of RSA, there's actually a separate statute for it. There is a Summer Academy Reading Program, or what we call SARP. And it has some pretty specific rules as to how it is run through those administrative rules. But it also states that specifically this is for students who are in 3rd grade and above that are still in that RSA requirement section, okay? So for those rules for that Summer Academy Reading Program, remember it must be 4 weeks long and have 4 days each week with 3 hours of each day. That's spelled out in administrative rules. There's no wiggle room in there. Because I often get a lot of emails saying, well, can we do 2.5 hours? Or can we do 3.5 days? It's pretty specific in the rules that for a Summer Academy Reading Program for grades 3 and above, it must be 4 weeks long with 4 days in each week and 3 hours each day. You can do 2 weeks in June and 2 weeks in July. It could be 4 weeks in July. That was established from our legal department last year. And the teachers who work in a Summer Academy Reading Program must be qualified by either having being a certified reading specialist, having Literacy First training through the Pain Education Center, so any of their programming through Pain Education, or letters training, and specifically volume 1 of letters training. The primary focus on this must be on reading and intervention. Obviously, this is our 3rd grade students who were at risk of retention or were needing to be promoted, even though they are not able to show reading sufficiency yet. And then 4th and 5th graders who are still struggling. And that these are students who may be still working to complete a portfolio or alternative assessment. Okay, so there's that option. There's also a second option for summer programming. And this is what got a lot of people really, really confused. In the statute, it also allows for summer programming for any of the grades affected by RSA, grades K through 3, that can be paid for through RSA funds, as long as the focus is on reading instruction. It doesn't have all of the extra rules there. We don't call that Summer Academy Reading Program. It's just summer programming. Okay, so are you kind of catching what I'm saying? There's 2 options. You use that formal Summer Academy Reading Program. And if those of you that have been around a while, remember there used to be a separate budget line for this. That's why the distinction. It's no longer there. But that one specifically states 3rd grade and above, and you have to follow those guidelines for who can teach and what the structure has to be. Or you can use RSA funds to pay for summer programming for grades K through 3, as long as it's focused on reading instruction for the majority of that time. And that's the only guideline. Is that clear as mud? Okay. But we just wanted to make sure that you knew that there were those 2 options there. It is not required. Since we don't have those dedicated funds for summer programming, whether it's Summer Academy Reading Program or just simple summer programming, it's always recommended, but it is not required. We have some districts that say they don't receive enough funding to support a summer program, either one of the options. They might do something like sending some books home with kids or helping support a library program or things like that. That is a district level decision as to what that looks like, what is done, that type of thing. All right. So I'm going to move on our agenda, but I'm sure if any questions come up, please pop them in that chat, and Deb's going to help monitor that and make sure I don't skip any. So as we're getting ready for our Oklahoma State Testing Program, or OSTP, a couple of things to keep in mind as it pertains to RSA. Remember that our 3rd graders do take the OSTP. They will be taking it online this year. For those schools that want to get that RSA reporting back earlier, then the testing must be completed by April 27th. These dates are set by our Office of Assessment. So I'm just relaying the information given to me. So you need to have the 3rd grade ELA testing completed by April 27th in order to get your 3rd grade data back by May 17th. If you turn in finish the 3rd grade ELA testing after April 27th, you will get the RSA data, but you'll get it along with all of the other data. I believe it comes in June. I don't have that date off the top of my head, but you will have to be a delay a couple of weeks. So that April 27th day, I believe, Megan, all of the 3rd grade testing is for online. But as far as if you have any students that have a paper pencil accommodation, then you want to double check with Cheyenne Short or the Office of Assessment to make sure that we have those dates down. So any of those special situations, check with the Office of Assessment, make sure that you're clearly stating that you're needing this for 3rd grade to get the RSA scores back, so that we can get those taken care of. Let's see, if we teach 4th and 5th grade students in the summer, it must be, if you're doing this with RSA funds for summer programming and you're calling it that Summer Academy Reading Program, it would have to be, yes, following that 4 days a week, 3 hours each day. Okay.
Someone asked if it could be longer than 3 hours each day.
Yes, that's the minimum. That's the minimum that it has to be, yes. You could do 12 hours a day. I wouldn't recommend it, but there's nothing preventing you from doing it. Good luck with that if you do it. Let me know how that goes. So, all right. So we wanted to spend the bulk of our time today, though, really making sure that everyone on the call is clear about what is required for promotion and retention of third grade students this year. I know I am already starting to get the panicked parent phone calls, and I know you are as well in the district of, my students not doing well. They're talking about retaining my student. What do we need to do? So keep in mind that this is for third grade students. All third grade students are expected to participate in our state reading test in the OSTP. If you have a third grade student who does not participate in the OSTP for any reason, whether they are out ill, they just refuse to test, whatever the situation is, then just like last year, you would need to use one of the other pathways, either the screener, an exemption, or the student reading proficiency team to determine whether that student would be promoted to fourth grade or need to be retained. So last year, we developed a flow chart to try to help with this. So I'm going to just use this as we talk through this a bit. You can also find this flow chart on the RSA coordinator webpage, just as a PDF, so that you can quickly print it and hand it out if you need to. But remember that we have 4 pathways to promotion. That state test is not our end all be all, and that's something that it's really important that we emphasize when we're communicating with our community partners, because they still have the misconception if they don't pass the test, they have to repeat third grade, and that's simply not correct. What I generally say, my wording is, if a student does not meet that criteria, that RSA criteria on the state test, it requires we have a conversation about what's best for that student moving forward. Okay, it doesn't require one action or another. That's dependent on what's going on with the child. But it does require that as a school and family partnership, we do have a conversation together. So that first pathway of promoting, that's an automatic promotion to fourth grade, is if they do meet that RSA criteria. If you will recall, again, those of you that are familiar with the OSTP, our students receive one of 4 levels, either a below basic, proficient, or advanced on their ELA assessment. Those don't have anything at all to do with RSA. Because our third grade students have another column that says RSA criteria, and it will say meets or does not meet. That's the column that we would need to use on a student's OSTP report to determine if they're eligible for promotion to fourth grade under the Reading Sufficiency Act, or if we need to have that conversation about retention or not. Okay, so remember that's that using that RSA. So this is not a pass the test. This is, do they meet RSA criteria or not? I know it gets very confusing because it does not line up with any of our proficiency levels. So what you will often find is that with the RSA criteria, you are going to have really all of your below basic students are not going to meet RSA criteria. I don't think I've ever seen a student scoring at the below basic level that has met it. You will see some of your basic students that meet RSA criteria and some that do not. It's kind of in that range in there somewhere. All of our students that score proficient or advanced, those proficiency levels on the OSTP, also meet RSA criteria. I've never seen a student that scored proficient that did not meet RSA criteria, especially in the last couple of years. So just kind of keep that in mind. So it's when we're talking about that RSA criteria, we're talking about, is that child have sufficient reading skills in order to be successful? It's not necessarily that they're proficient at the college career readiness level that we're hoping to see when we're looking at that proficiency level, It's, do they have sufficient reading skills? So it's kind of a little bit of a misnomer there, but you will notice that it's just a little bit off. So even though we have some students scoring basic at that basic level, they might have met RSA criteria. They might not. That's where you have to look at that column. Okay. So if that's where the majority of our students usually fall, is if they meet RSA criteria. You don't need to do anything else. We record their OSTP scores in their files anyway. You're done. No extra documentation is needed. If they do not meet RSA criteria, the next step that we recommend you look at is Pathway 2, which is looking at the screening assessment that you have been providing since kindergarten. It can be any of the assessments that are approved by our State Board of Education. So we currently have 7 assessments that are approved for this school year. A student might have met the end of year target for 3rd grade at any time during 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grade. If they met that end of year 3rd grade target, then they are eligible for promotion. So let me show you, remind you this, coming over here to our RSA coordinator webpage. Remember that we have this technical guidance, these documents here. I'm going to just go to Matt Grove. I'm just going to pick one. And if you'll go to the very back, last page, remember that we have, these are the grade level targets for the beginning, middle, and end of each year for K through 3. We are looking for this end of year 3rd grade target. And you'll notice on each of these, it's really big and in red. If they scored this score at any time during 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grade, whether it's during a benchmark window or when they're being progress monitored, then they are eligible for promotion to 4th grade. Okay. I know there gets to be some confusion here because we'll have saying, oh, well, we met the grade level target at the beginning of year. Remember, we're shooting for promotion purposes only, that end of year target. We've had to have a lot of conversations in the past about, we might have a student that say scores a 183 at the beginning of the year. That does not mean they're behind. It means they're right where they need to be. They have not met that eligibility for promotion yet. But again, we have a years of instruction, so it makes sense that they might not be there. That would not be a student that I would consider at risk, that I need to do interventions for, that I need to write a plan for. But we do need to ensure that we need to push them forward as we are with any student as we're giving instruction. Let's say this student, this hypothetical student, at the beginning of the year scores a 195. Woohoo, we are happy. And that student is eligible for promotion to 4th grade. Maybe their scores slip down a little bit through the rest of the year, but as long as they have met that at one point during that time, then they're eligible for promotion. Okay. All right. Let me stop there because I see the chat's been moving a little bit. Deb, let's start with pathways 1 or 2. Anything we need to address?
You actually did answer a question about pathway 2 because someone had asked if it was the screening assessment benchmark only or progress monitoring. So you just answered that.
Perfect.
Read their mind. And then if the 3rd grade has completed the ELA portion, but not the math portion, I guess this goes back to STP. Do we still get scores by May 17th?
My understanding is yes. It's just the ELA portion that we need to have done by April 27th in order to get those ELA scores back early. Okay.
And then if they met target on progress monitoring, that would count. So we just, yeah.
As long as they're able to get that composite score, then yes. The only caveat I would say is in some of our screeners, they take, instead of a full where they get a composite score, they might just take one subtest. That makes it very difficult to get that composite. I might give them the full battery, let's say in November, because I feel like that's where we need to see where they are. And that's perfectly fine. It doesn't have to be in that benchmark window, but we need to have that composite score.
So it does need to be the longer test because this person is saying that STARS progress monitoring is a shortened version.
From my understanding, and I am not the expert on STAR, so just but from my understanding, Michelle Burks, I think you're on this call, you're my STAR expert, that even that shortened version will still give that composite score because it's taking all of that information and pulling it together.
That's correct. If you're on the enterprise and or the 360, the test links are the same. You should do a live chat and check with your rep to be sure. But we call them progress monitorings because they're kind of our mid-semester checkup, and we don't administer it to all of our students. But it's still the same assessment that they would take any other day any other time. So
thank you, Michelle. I always appreciate your help with that. Okay, anything else on pathways 1 or 2, Deb?
Nope.
All right, then we will move forward. Also, remember that the documentation piece for pathway 2 is you would just document when that target was met, what you were using. There is a place on the individualized program of reading instruction, that IPRI form, for that to be done. So you don't have to create a new form. It can just be done on the IPRI. If one is written, if they don't have an IPRI and you feel that you need to document that because that's there, just a simple note in the file of Deb Wade took the STAR assessment and scored this on in November of 2022, making her eligible for 4th grade, for promotion to 4th grade. You know, very, very quick, nothing really big there. Okay, pathway 3. This is where we tend to get a lot of questions and where we did have some changes a couple of years ago that people got a little confused about. Remember that we have 7 exemptions for good cause. And I'm going to come back out here to our RSA page, and I'm going to pull up this family guide just so I have something to point to. It makes this a little bit easier. It's nice and big so we can see this. Remember that with our good cause exemptions, we have those 7 that they're again very limited and mostly pertain to students who have exceptional or well-defined situations. So we have our first good cause would be students who are English learners that have had less than 2 years of instruction in English, and they have an LIEP or that limited, or sorry, LEP, limited English proficient tool that they use to make sure that they're receiving that instruction. We also might have exemption 2, students who have disabilities identified on an individualized education program that indicates that they are to be assessed with the OAP, or the Oklahoma Alternate Assessment Program, that portfolio test. We often have districts that get exemption 2 and exemption 5 confused because they both deal with students who are receiving services through the special education department. So remember, exemption 2 are for those students that are more of our severe profound, that have an alternative assessment program. They do not participate in the OSTP. Instead, they participate in the OAP. This is defined on their IEP. This is not a decision that we arbitrarily make. There's some very specific rules for which students can participate in that alternative assessment. Exemption 3 would be students who take an alternative reading test. I often get a lot of people confusing this with pathway 2 with the screener. The alternative reading test would be another standardized assessment that's similar in format to the OSTP. So it might be the ITBS, the SAT-10, the Terra Nova. Those are the ones that have already been approved for that. I realize that the forms for the ITBS have since been updated. They are not updated on our website, but using the forms that ITBS currently offers would be sufficient for meeting this good cause exemption. Okay. but the acceptable level of performance that we have defined is meeting at the 45th percentile on the reading portion of that standardized reading test. So again, SAT 10, Terra Nova, or ITBS, any of those forms that are currently available at the 45th percentile for on the reading assessment. And again, the Good Cause 3, that can be completed anytime after the OSTP is taken. It does further define in our administrative rules that Good Cause 3 would not be met prior to the OSTP. It would be given after the OSTP. So once I'm finished with the OSTP, if I feel that that student did not do well, or I want to make sure I have a backup score, then I can give them the SAT 10 or the Terra Nova, the ITBS. I can also use any time in a summer programming to provide this that alternative assessment for students. If I want to give them some tutoring or kind of give them a little help and then give them that. Okay. Good Cause 4 would be a teacher developed portfolio that would be provided to the student. Oh, let me go back to this and go to our website again. And you will find our portfolio checklist. Blow this up where we can see this. Making sure that we have, again, we have that IPRI, that we have any screening and progress monitoring assessments that we need, and that we have our 8 assessments that are included as part of our RSA criteria for the state test. Now you'll notice that these are the 2016 standards, because that is what is being used for the OSTP this year. And so the portfolio should also meet those same expectations. That's for the OSTP. So we are looking for those samples for those. Now, keep in mind, if you've been using our new and improved updated standards that Deb and her team have worked so hard on, there's a pretty tight alignment there anyway. So the activities that you're doing that would be samples for that would also, you can likely find a corresponding objective there to make sure they have that completed. Okay. Keep in mind, there is not a set assignment that this has to be. This is what the teacher, what's being used in the classroom, provided that the student is able to do this independently. So homework assignments, you don't really know if that's independent or not. If I had to sit down one-on-one and help the student, that would not be an appropriate sample to use. But if it's something that the student was able to go off, bring back, and complete on their own with at least a 70%, then that's an appropriate sample for meeting the needs of that. Okay. Let's see. I know that I've got a few questions. I'm going to get through the rest of the exemptions, then I'm going to come back and hit all the exemptions at once. Okay. Let's see. Let's come back to our exemptions here. Okay, Good Cause 5, excuse me. Again, those students that have an individualized education program or IEP that says that the student is getting that remediation in reading instruction and that they have made adequate progress towards their IEP goals. In the past, this exemption used to also require a previous year's retention. If you will recall, that was changed a couple of years ago. This now states that it's students who have an IEP that addresses reading or language, things that are associated with reading, that are getting that remediation reading, as long as they are making adequate progress towards their IEP goals, which is determined by the IEP team, then that student is eligible for this exemption. Okay. So it's the IEP team that decides what's adequate progress or not. Exemption 6 would be students who have been receiving remediation in reading. In other words, they've had an IPRI or they're getting that intervention for 2 or more years, but they're still struggling. They do not have an IEP or not getting special education services and have been previously retained once for academic reasons. Recall that this also would include in being retained in pre-K for academic reasons, Now, this is not, we decided we needed another year before we started kindergartens, but this was, we decided we needed to repeat pre-K because of academic reasons, and that might be noted. And transitional courses, if they did a transitional first, so that they did first grade, a T1, and then second grade, so that's 3 years between that, that's considered a year of retention for this purpose. And then finally, exemption 7 would be those students that have an exceptional emergency circumstance. This has to be applied for and approved through the Office of Assessment. Basically, it's an exception to the OSTP in general. Okay, this is not something that our office determines. This is that exemption is determined through the Office of Assessment. Okay, Deb, let me have it. What do we have for our good cause exemptions?
Well, there's all kinds of things on here now. We might have to backtrack at the end of the meeting back to some summer reading information for some people who joined
Okay.
a bit later. One question on the RSA quick guide, it indicates student samples with dates are required documentation at every tier level. Is this required for every tier 1 through 3 student, or only students on good cause exemption 4?
Okay, good question on that. So what the statute states, and it looks like we might need to clarify what that quick guide is stating. But what the statute states is that any student in 3rd grade who is shown to be at risk, basically if they're on an IPRI, then we should be starting that portfolio process for that student. That doesn't require that you finish the portfolio, but it means that we need to start gathering that information. I know that I've had just last week, somebody called, said, we've got a 3rd grade student in tears because we're making them do all this 3rd grade work independently, and that's not what they're ready for, because we've got to do all the portfolio samples. That's not the intent here. The intent is you're gathering what they are able to do, and it might be the portfolio shows exactly why they cannot succeed in 3rd grade. It might be they're doing this at a 1st grade level to be able to be successful. So our intent is not to get kids in tears over this. The intent is, how do we intentionally document what this student is able to do, and can they complete 3rd grade work at an independent level or not? So for students who have met that grade level target, that are a lot of times they're included in that tier 1, because remember, tier 1 is all of our students. They do not have to have that portfolio started. You might, and I know a lot of schools that go ahead and start collecting it in case they decide they need it later. That's a district decision that you guys decide what is going to work best for you. In our digital age, a lot of our teachers already have a lot of these samples ready to go anyway. For doing some different types of assessments, it might just be that we have some more assignments that we need to pull in. So hopefully that clarifies. It's the students who are on an IPRI that we have to start that portfolio for, that we have to start thinking about what samples might be appropriate to use, or might be appropriate to show that this is really not a student who's able to do this right now. Some of the examples to think about, I know a lot of districts utilize some of the assessments, the formative assessments already included in their curriculum program, and assign, like, whether it's a full assessment or even specific questions. I know there might be a unit test or a benchmark test, and they might say that these 8 questions are addressing this particular standard. So we'll see how they do on those questions as opposed to other questions. So we might have one work sample that actually meets a couple of standards if it's a larger, more comprehensive. It could be just an assignment that they're doing that says we are, let's see. Let's go back to this portfolio. Just a minute. So it's I'm looking at this for comparing and contrasting details to discriminate genres. I might have just an assignment that I've given my students that they're working on independently. It doesn't have to be a test format, but I know that it's something that they're not working with a partner, they're not doing something else, so that I know that they did this independently. Can they do that? Maybe they create a storyboard to summarize or write a short paragraph summarizing the events in this text that they wrote. And I grade that. They scored above a 70%. That's one of my samples. Or it could be more of a test format where they're answering questions as another sample. Okay. So that's one of the reasons this has been left up to districts to use what is it that you're already using in class, rather than having to create specific assignments that are only for the portfolio. What are you doing in your classroom already that can be incorporated into this? Just for ease, Deb, are there any other questions here dealing specifically with the portfolio or cause exemption 4?
Nope, I see exemption 5,
Okay.
6. It did talk about how many samples should be in a portfolio.
Okay. Remember, you have to have 4 for each of these. So 4 times 8. So you'll see 32 different assignments in there.
Okay. Is there a 20-day waiting period between the OSTP and alternate testing?
Not between the OSTP and alternate testing, but between giving the alternate test over and over. In other words, I might finish the OSTP and the next week give, let's say, the ITBS. I will not want to give the ITBS again until another 20 calendar days have passed, just for the fidelity of that particular assessment, because that's not the type of assessment that you would give day after day after day, because you're not using that many forms. Especially if you're using the same form, you would not want to do that, because that would definitely mess with the validity of that test. Okay. But you do not have to wait 20 days after the OSTP. Most of you are already going to be out of school at that point.
Yeah.
So.
Can good cause exemption 5 still count for a student who started receiving IEP services for reading in the current school year?
Yes, they have to have that IEP in place prior to the OSTP. But as long as it's prior to the OSTP, then yes, that good cause exemption 5 would apply.
Do we need to collect portfolio samples if the student meets cause exemption 6 already?
I'm going to say that what the statute says is that for students who are below grade level target, that we must start that portfolio. However, that portfolio remains in-house. It's not turned in anywhere. So beyond that, as a district, decide how that would be handled.
Hello? Hello?
Hi, somebody might want to mute themselves. Okay, what else do we have, Deb?
Let's see. Students in third grade who do not meet criteria, that goes back to summer school. Does attending summer school help them promote to 4th grade, or do they need to take an additional assessment? If so, what does their assessment work?
Sure. If a student is attending summer programming or the summer academy reading program, either one, simple attendance in and of itself is not a pathway for promotion. However, during that summer programming, a student might take the screening assessment or an alternative assessment or complete a portfolio in order to meet that second pathway or one of those exemptions in order to be able to move forward. So it's the what the summer programming provides is additional time to meet that, but simply showing up to class would not be sufficient to meet that.
We have a situation with a student that has an IEP, a doctor letter that states they cannot take online screeners due to seizures. How do we proceed with this, since it's currently stated in legislation that all students must be screened?
Yeah, that sounds like a bit of an exception. So I would first make sure that we keep that documentation in that student's file. If we have, gosh, That's what I'm going to have to check with our legal department on, just to be on the safe side of how the right way to handle that. I know that we've got a way we can handle it. I just don't have it off the top of my head. So let me we're going to make a note on that one, to check in on that and get back with you on that. I do see one about Spanish, and that's one I get a question quite a bit. As far as taking one of the assessments in Spanish, because I know especially STAR does have that capability, that is a great idea to be able to figure out where that student is, what you need to do for instruction. However, it will not be sufficient as far as a promotion decision, because we are required to do the OSTP. It needs to mirror that, which is provided in English. So for the promotion decision, it would need to be the English version. Now you might have that Spanish version as evidence that the student is progressing well. If you're noticing that they're doing well with that Spanish version, and that with EL instruction would be able to be successful if they move forward through a committee. But at that point, it won't meet that pathway too. Does that make sense? Okay, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to ask if there was anything else on there.
Can we roll up the formative assessment data from unit assessments to include in the portfolio?
Uh-huh. Yeah, if as the district you deem that that's appropriate for the portfolio and is meeting those standards, then it's eligible to be used in that portfolio.
And the link to the checklist is on the running agenda, is that correct?
We have, it's not right now, but I'll add it.
Okay.
Okay. So
and you've already taken care of the ELL. There's a little confusion on the portfolio form. It says 36 work samples, but we just did the math, so only 32. It's on page 2 of the portfolio checklist.
That would be a typo, so we'll get that taken care of. Oh my. I don't care how many times we look at something, we find typos. Tell you what, let's pause for a minute, Deb, and I'm going to go ahead and let's talk about pathway 4. I know we probably have some other questions, but I want to make sure that we get through all of this before our time is up. Pathway 4 is the student reading proficiency team, which we also call our committee promotion. This is the pathway that allows for that local control decision, looking at all of the extenuating circumstances for a student and what really is best for the student based on the decisions of the adults that work directly with that student. So the team, which would consist of the student's current 3rd grade teacher teaching reading instruction. So in case you departmentalize, it has to be the one that's teaching reading, not the science teacher. A teacher from the 4th grade that is involved with reading instruction, and the family or parent or guardian of that student. Those are the 3 required members. If a reading specialist is available in the district, they should also be involved with this team. If the district does not have a reading specialist employed, then you would not have that position on this team. Okay, you do not need to go out and contract with someone just for the purposes of these team meetings. I know early on, that was what districts were having to do. That is no longer the case. So those 3 to 4 people need to meet as a team and look at what is going on with this student and what is going to be the best option for this child. There may be other teachers or other team members that work with this student involved in this committee, and that's perfectly fine. But it's really those core members that would actually be making the final decision on what's going to happen. So there might be a Title I teacher, an interventionist, that type of thing. That's also contributing, maybe the EL teacher contributing to what they're seeing, but they would not necessarily have that deciding vote or factor as to whether that student is promoted or retained. So with this, the team, again, 3rd grade teacher, 4th grade teacher, parent, and then reading specialist if available, would look at all of the data available for the student, things to consider. Has the student been present? You know, would they, if they're chronically absent, that might be a warning sign that needs to be considered. What's their progress been like? This is where that progress monitoring data can be very critical in making that decision. It might be that they're not quite where they need to be yet, but they've been making really good progress. And with this trajectory, we think they can move on to 4th grade and still be successful. It might be that their progress is completely flat. And if that's the case, we really need to figure out what's going to happen and what's going to be best for this student. Those are the types of questions that we're looking at, and then determining, does the student need to go to 4th grade with probation, or do they need to remain in 3rd grade for another year? If they go to 4th grade, that requires a unanimous decision. So in other words, the 3rd grade teacher, the 4th grade teacher, the reading specialist, if available, and the parent all have to agree that promotion is in the best interest of this student. If there is anyone on the team that does not agree, then that student must be retained. And that's where the conversation stops. So I sometimes will get the calls from the parent that says, I don't want to retain my student, but the school wants to retain. That's the way this law is written. We go through each of those pathways. And if we're down to this point, if it's not a unanimous decision, then your student has to be retained. I also, more rarely, but do get the calls from the school that says, we want to promote the student, but the parent wants to retain. Again, same thing. If it's not a unanimous decision to promote, the student must be retained. Okay. If the student is promoted through that unanimous decision, then it is important to realize that this is something that will have to be re-examined next year. We need to continue to provide intervention for that student, that they need to continue to get that same documentation that on intervention that we would do, and that this team would meet again at the end of 4th grade to decide if the student is ready for 5th grade. And if the student is still struggling in 5th grade, same thing after 5th grade to moving to 6th grade. Now, once we move to transition after 5th grade, then it moves to a locally developed plan and it's no longer under RSA. So we get that question a lot about what do we do in the middle school? The middle school level, that is now a local control decision. It is no longer under RSA. It just says that you need to continue to meet their needs. But how you do that will look different from district to district. If the student is retained, it's important to note that that student has to continue to receive that intervention. They would still be on a plan, even if the beginning of their 2nd year of 3rd grade they take that screener and they're above the grade level target, they still need to get intervention. They're repeating a grade level for a reason. So if we just give them straight 3rd grade curriculum again for a second time, it's unlikely that anything is going to change for that student. So it's important that we make sure that we provide that intervention and that we're making sure that that student is ready to be successful, because we want them in 4th grade and successful the following year. Let's see, I think that pretty much hits that. So you'll notice we're going through a lot of things here before we hit down to this retention. Traditionally, over the last several years, as far as number of students that are being retained in the state of Oklahoma, it's about 2 to 3% by the time all is said and done. So I know that there's sometimes people feel like we're retaining a lot of our kids. We really aren't. It's 2 to 3%. A lot of our students traditionally, again, meet this pathway 1. The next most used pathway is pathway 3, often with our IEP students and our EL students. Then it's that pathway 2, and then we have the remaining that are under pathway 4. So just so you have an idea of how that's met. No one is going to come and yell at you if you are using any of those pathways for students, because they're there for a reason. It's up to the district to decide what is best. I know I've had sometimes principals say, are we going to get in trouble if we use like pathway 4 for too many kids? No, we're not. You have that reason, that rationale. You're the ones that are looking at that. You're the ones working with that student. And that's why that decision is being left at the local level. Okay. All right. So Deb, we have 10 minutes. What are some of them? Because I know we've got a lot of questions, and it might be that we have to get to the most pressing ones for right now. And we may need to do a follow-up on this topic next month.
Okay, so someone asked a question and someone reposted it. So we're definitely going to make sure that this one gets asked. It pertains to iStation,
Okay.
and technical guidance for the RSA screener from our website. It states on the second page that the reading on level is above 40%. It also states that 20 to 40% is at risk. But then in the next paragraph, it states in bold that the goal is 243, which is only 40%, not 41st%. So are we going by 244?
Okay.
Which is 41%.
All right. So that was filled out by the vendor, iStation. I mean, I just give them a blank form. They fill that out. So we'll have to get them to clean that up for this next year. The grade level target is the 40th percentile. So what's been asked for them to provide is the standard score number that corresponds to the 40th percentile as those grade level targets. Okay, that is so whatever, if they're meeting at the 40th percentile or above, they're eligible for promotion. So that's the one we're going to stick with because we need to be able to use the same language across the board. We'll go there, and then we'll get iStation to clean that language up on the technical guidance as quickly as we can.
Okay, and then backing up about summer reading academy options. Academy is not mandatory. What can we do in its place?
Okay, so I know some districts will send out book packs to their students so that they can have some opportunities for reading. There's some activities there. Some of them maybe have their school library open 1 or 2 days a week to be able to provide some reading time, intervention time when they're meeting with students. But just a lot of times it's based on the budget that the school has. Since that, I know some of our rural schools that just don't have the funding to be able to be open all 4 days, but they might be able to staff their library for about 3 hours, a couple of times a week to let students come in, especially when they don't have a community public library. So just a couple of quick ideas there.
Okay, and does the same code count for both types of summer school?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's still the same OCAS coding. And Connie, I just saw yours
Okay.
on exemption 6. If they already meet exemption 6, I'm not going to say you don't have to collect portfolio because it clearly states in the law that we have to start a portfolio. But I also, where that finishes and where that ends is at the district level. We're not collecting anything at the state. I'm going to let you go from there. I can talk to you individually a little bit more if you need to on that, but with states, we have to start the portfolio for anyone at that IPRI not meeting that grade level target. All right. Anything else, Deb, that just is like, we've got to have an answer right this second?
Well, I mean, someone just needed some overall general assistance and guidance on student portfolios.
Okay.
Asking what to do with them, please.
Okay, what to do? I think I need a little bit more information on the question.
Hi, Melissa. Paula Helm.
Hi, Paula.
So my question is, okay, I hear what you're saying about we have to start one.
Right.
And yes, we have a plan for that. We've started them. It's all great. But what do we do with them? Do they go in the student cumulative folder? Do they go in some IRI folder?
Gotcha.
What happens now?
Gotcha. Okay, so as far as that documentation would go, you'll find, so this piece of paper right here that has this checklist, this would be your documentation that you could put in a CUME folder. I would not recommend putting all of your work samples in a CUME folder because that CUME folder will get to be too massive by the time you get everything in there. As a single sheet of paper is much, much more manageable. Your portfolio could be even a digital compilation. It does not have to be in print. So again, depending on how you are already collecting those work samples from students, I would think through what is the least amount of work that your teachers would need to be able to do to be able to meet that requirement and for the best interest of the student. I know I've had some schools, especially middle school counselors, that just love it when they get boxes and boxes and boxes of these folders that are 2 inches thick on every single student, and they don't know what to do with them. At that point, you don't need them. I mean, once the administrators have signed off on them, that they meet those needs, you're done. I mean, we just need this documentation that they've agreed to it and we're moving on. Does that help?
That helps a lot. I really
Okay.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, so let me come back to our agenda just because I know we've only got 4 minutes left, and I do want to do our quick information pieces. We know we've got some professional development coming up tonight. We have Lynn Stone, who is doing orthographic mapping, spelling, and word forms. It's at 6:30. It is free to attend. If you've never heard Lynn, she has written several books like Read for Life, Spelling for Life. She is Scottish by birth and lives in Australia. And so she has a delightful accent. But she is extremely knowledgeable and easy to listen to. So she's joining us all the way from Melbourne to talk about reading and spelling. So this is, again, free. It will be recorded. The recording, however, is only available to members of the Reading League Oklahoma. That organization provides this as part of their service to the state. They make this free to all, but then that's how they are able to benefit their members. So you can find that registration right there. I just checked in with them earlier. There's about 130 people already registered, and I think they have 300 seats. So there's plenty of room still if you're wanting to attend that tonight. On Monday, AIM Institute out of Pennsylvania is doing their 9th annual Research to Practice Symposium. And this is a really rich resource that they have. Again, this is free and a recording is available, so you can register just to get the recording if you'd like. Dr. Julie Washington is the one that is facilitating this symposium. She is quite interesting to listen to, and is definitely an expert on different dialects, including African-American English, when working with students who might be struggling with some different phonological issues. But she also addresses all types of dialects, because it's not just the color of a student's skin that we're looking at, it's their dialect we're looking at that we want to address when we're reading. So we want to maybe learn from her. We have also Elsa Cardenas Hagen, who is an expert in English learners. And then Kareem Weaver, who is wonderful to listen to too. I have never heard Risha Conroy, so I'm interested to hear what she has to say. But looking at the different linguistic variations on reading. And when you think about the rich dialects across our state, I can see a lot of implications for our instruction here in Oklahoma. And then finally, we have the Oregon Teaching and Instruction and Intervention Annual Conference at the end of April. Again, free, and a recording will be available for those 2 days, because again, we have difficulty finding 2 days to go to a conference these days. So there's some opportunities for you to just learn. There's a lot been going on. We do know that we are getting geared up here at the State Department for Engage OK. We will be in person and on the road this year in July. So we hope to see a lot of you as we are traveling across the state. I believe the weeks of July 11th and July 18th, we'll be going to 7 different stops. So Be looking for announcements about that coming up soon. And then we will have our next meeting on April 13th at 2 o'clock with the same Zoom information. We will have the recording for this meeting posted on the website, hopefully in the next day or two. Okay. All right, it is 3 o'clock. We are going to stick around a little bit, but I know many of you have other things that you need to get off to. We are going to capture this chat because I know that there were several questions that we were not able to get to, and we will probably in April be addressing a lot of these. If there's something that looks like it's more timely, we need to address right away, we'll contact you or send out a follow-up that way. So that'll help us with being able to check in. Thank you, Deb, for your help as always. We appreciate it. And for everybody
Absolutely.
else, have a wonderful spring for a couple of days, a winter, and then back to spring. So everyone stay safe and warm. Thank you all.
Melissa,
Yes.
hi. Is there any updates on any dyslexia screeners that have been added?
Screeners have been added? No screeners have been added. If we are, if any more screeners were to be added, it would be in next academic year. It would not be for this coming up year.
Okay, so Ames Web won't be on there then.
No,
All right.
no, not for this year, because we're not doing a review over the summer. So,
Okay.
okay.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thanks all.